Now, what I want to explain to you right now is how to be active, number one, and what's an active leg. This terminology that's kind of goofy in our industry. It's really specific to our industry when you talk about it. What's an active leg? And I'm going to explain that to you. An enrollment tree versus placement tree. Once again, that's kind of odd terminology. It's not what you're used to in your normal life. But an enrollment tree versus a placement tree, it's a lineage, it's a line of sponsorship, it's how people get connected. And I'll explain that to you. But first off, let me just show you what an active leg looks like. And here's the example. Now, when you look and you see you, and under you, that first person has 120 PQV or 80 ADV. What does that 80 mean? 80 means you have 80 in volume in your auto delivery order, your monthly order that comes in every month, and you're set up on that in advance, and it's great because then you just don't miss a month. And it's products you're going to use anyway. Or you have what we call 120 PQV. What's 120 PQV? It means your shopping cart orders, your personal shopping cart orders, plus those of any of your preferred customer volume. And when those add up to be at least 120, you qualify as well. You're active. So what does an active leg mean then? So let's say the first person you sponsored, they have 120 PQV or 80 ADV. The second person you personally sponsor, let's say they have 120 PQV or 80 ADV. But that third person got in and didn't do anything. But that third person sponsored somebody that is on 80 ADV or they have 120 PQV. But because they're active, that means that entire leg is active. So you still have 3 active legs even though somebody you personally enrolled is not active. It's not about them, it's about the leg. It's about the team that's built underneath them. Okay, now let's talk about enrollment tree versus placement tree. This can be confusing, but I want you just to step back and if you listen to this explanation, it's funny how it makes perfectly good sense. There's 2 ways we pay people. Some is based on enrollment tree, and the other is based on a placement tree. And it's really important to understand that we call an enrollment tree your LQV. That's your leadership qualifying volume. But when you hear LQV, just think of those are the people that I've enrolled, who've enrolled people, who've enrolled people, who've enrolled people. When you think of a placement tree, that's called your group qualifying volume. And it includes all of your LQV, but it could be someone from your upline that's placed someone in your organization. So it's volume that you're the beneficiary of that's been placed in your organization from somebody above you. Your GQV is your LQV plus your personal purchase volume and your placed brand partners volume from your upline. So look at enrollment tree. Keep it basic. Let's say in this case I have 7 active enrollment legs. Now if you'll notice that leg 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my 5th leg, it says 0 QV. And so there's a tendency to think, well, I guess they're not active. But remember, this is an enrollment tree. So E sponsored J, who sponsored M, and all of them are at 0, and M sponsored P. P has an auto order of 80. That makes that an active leg. It's not just your personals, it's where they come from in depth in the enrollment tree. So here I have 7 active legs, and if you do all the math and add those up, my LQV, or my volume, my leadership qualifying volume from that enrollment tree is 2,830. How does that play out in a placement tree? Because just because I personally enrolled these people, that's one way I'm going to look at them. In my placement tree, I may see them completely different. And here's an example. Let's say that F, my personally sponsored F, my 6th person that I personally sponsored, lives in Atlanta, and A lives in Atlanta. I may want to place F under A because they live in the same marketplace. And because they live in the same marketplace, it may be in F's best interest to build the business, going to the same meetings, being a part of the same process, being in the same team as A, if they're in the same market. There's reasons that you place people, and we'll talk about that in some of these videos. A is a personally enrolled person. Here's what's interesting. F and G are also personally enrolled, and I've decided to place them under A. So they're in my placement tree, they're 2 levels in depth, but in my enrollment tree, they're my first level brand partners because I personally enrolled them. I never lose personally enrolling them by placing them in depth. And H is somebody that A enrolled. And under G, if I place G under A, everything under G comes with G because that's G's enrollment tree. So G has sponsored K, who sponsored N. And when I place them, all of those three people move on over in the same place under G, but now under A, where I place them. And that has 1,800 GQV total. Second leg in the placement tree says B and C, and I personally sponsored B and C. So in my enrollment tree, they're next to each other. But in my placement tree, I put C under B. And I did that for a reason. And the reason could be as simple as they live near each other. It's a market, that's something they have in common. It's something that's in my best interest when I'm going to the same town, I'm working under the same place. But B and C, I've moved C under B in the placement tree. And what does C bring with them? C brings I and L because C enrolled I, who enrolled L. The third level, now this is the third brand partner, D. I personally sponsored D. My upline, let's say, here's an example. Let's say D lives in Michigan, and my upline has a group they started in Michigan, and they want to place them under me. Under D, for example. So D lives in Michigan, and maybe those three green people that you see also live in Michigan. There's a reason my upline placed them under me, under D, and that was a strategic placement they made. It was in the Greens' best interest to be under D. Now, the GQV there is 1,160. Now, my LQV there was only 80, but because some of that volume was placed under there, that counts in the GQV as well. E, in the placement tree, I have 4 legs in my placement tree, A, B, D, and E. And E under E naturally is J. They sponsored J, and J sponsored M, and M sponsored O, and M also sponsored P. And no one was placed under there. Everybody was built out of an enrollment tree there, but that's also looks like that in my placement tree. So in essence, what you're looking at is now you have a total GQV of 3,990. Where did that come from? Take the 2,830 that I had in my enrollment tree, and now you add into that your personal volume of 80 plus that 1,080 that my upline placed in depth. And when you do all the math and you add all that together, my placement tree shows 3,990. 2,830 of that comes from my leadership, my enrollment tree, my leadership qualifying volume. And I think the real key to this is for you to understand that when you personally enroll someone, you've always personally enrolled them. They never leave you from your enrollment tree as first in line on your enrollment tree. You may place them 100 levels in depth in your placement tree. But keep in mind, when you look at a placement tree, they seem so far away. They're really not. They're right next to you where they belong in your enrollment tree. You're the leader. You're the mentor, you're the coach, but you place them where it's in their best interest to be. And when you start looking at the volume of your GQV, your group qualifying volume, because that's in your placement tree. Remember, that's everything that's been placed underneath of you, plus your own personal volume for your purchases, versus your enrollment tree, which are just the people you personally enrolled, and the people they personally enrolled, and the people they personally enrolled, and the people they personally enrolled. And when you step back and you understand how those two trees work and how they work together, you start to understand how to build a business where you take the best of people's talents and you learn how to work with them where they are and put them where they need to be to take them to the levels they want to reach.